absolutely beautiful. Hey guys, Mickey from Tom's Outdoors, and welcome back to the Intro to Fly Fishing series. Now today guys, we're going to learn how to cast our fly rod. We've looked at what a fly rod is, what a reel is, what a line is, how to put them together, and if you haven't seen those videos, jump back and check them out because we'll go through the basics of those. But now today, we're going to come out here and we're going to practice how to cast a fly rod. Now to start off with, whenever you're doing practice casting, you want to make sure you're on nice soft grass or water ideally. You don't want to practice cast on concrete, it'll ruin your nice fly line, and chances are you'll hook a passerby or a moving car, and we don't want that. Another note on safety and starting off, always wear your sunnies and a hat, because even though we're just throwing around a bit of fluff today, you want to get into the habit of always having your sunnies on to protect your eyes and a hat to protect your head from both errant flies and the sun. Now, our rod's all strung up. I've got this nice bright line so you guys at home can see what I'm doing nice and clearly. And instead of using a fly, all I've got is a little bit of wool, and I'm going to tie that on using the penny knot, which we've learnt already, down to the end of my leader here. This is just a 9-foot leader, which is what I fish with the most, so it's what I practice with the most. You don't need to use too much, just use a little bit. You don't want a giant ball of wool because that'll affect your casting. Now, starting off with the basics of casting, we don't even want to think about the rod. You got to start casting with your legs. So, I'm right-handed. Now, if I was to go ahead and try and throw a ball as far as I could, I'd put my left foot forward and I'd toss like this. We're not throwing a fly rod though, we're casting it. It's much more akin to throwing a dart or flicking a paintbrush at something, and for that, I want my right foot forward to start off with. So, starting with your feet, if you're left-footed and left-handed, put your left foot forward. If you're right-footed and right-handed, put your right foot forward. If you're ambidextrous, have a crack. I'm not sure what you should do. This is a great stance for basic casting. We might get a little bit more developed later on, open up our stance and do all kinds of crazy things once we get longer. But to start off with, you want to put your best foot forward. The reason I do this, the reason I put my right foot forward, is that it straightens everything out and our energy is going to transfer really well. If I put my left foot forward, everything can get a bit loosey-goosey. Our waist comes into it, you know, we start working our hips, our shoulder, our elbow, our wrist. All we want to do is put our right foot forward or left foot forward and do a firm bicep curl. That's what we're going to work on next. Now that I've allowed you to pick up your rod, we want to look at how we're going to hold the rod. Now, basic grip for a fly rod is to come in, grip it firmly, not too hard, thumb on top, and then what I want you to do is tuck some line under your middle finger there for now. That's going to be the start of what we're going to talk about a little bit today, which is line control, which becomes very important as we cast further and further. That's our grip. Our arms nice and relaxed next to our, in this case, right foot forward, right hand down by our side, and the rod's flat to the ground. That's our perfect starting point for what we're going to call the pick up and lay down cast, otherwise known as the pop, stop, and paintbrush flick. Now the first step of this cast is to get, let's say, about a rod length and a half of fly line out in front of you. You can do that any way you can, kind of toss it out there, or you can put it out there in a pile, walk backwards. You just want to make sure that fly line ends up straight. So I've got straight line out in front of me. I'm relaxed, I'm holding the rod down, level with the grass or the water. Everything in fly casting starts right here. It's really important whenever you're starting your cast, whenever you're starting your pick up and lay down cast, to start with your rod tip right down, keeps everything nice and tight. Being tight throughout our cast is really, really important. We've got about a fly rod and a half of fly line out. Let's call that, 12, 15 feet. Now all casts start with a good amount of acceleration and then finish in a nice stop. What that does, this pop, so accelerating to a stop, is get that fly line traveling behind us at a rate of knots. As I pop it up, the line starts flying backwards through the air, backwards through the air, backwards through the air. And then as I stop, it pulls the rod. That pull on the rod loads it. It loads that big spring. That's what we call load, funnily enough. Now that bend is where the power for our cast comes from. The power for a cast doesn't come through your muscles, throwing it back there and tossing it forward. The power for a cast comes through timing, popping and stopping at just the right moment. Then all I've got to do is release that spring, release that energy or load in the direction I want it to go. So then I pop it forward or I flick it forward. Now you've heard me talk about this paintbrush flick at the end here. The reason I call it a paintbrush flick is because it's like you've got a paintbrush in your hand or a fly rod and you've got a canvas out in front of you here, and we're gonna flick paint onto that canvas. Another good way to think about it is if we're throwing a dart at a dartboard at a pub. So we're pushing forward, following that energy. It's like a karate chop that goes forward like that. So now we have our pop and stop and our paintbrush flick. We call our pop and stop our back cast and our paintbrush flick our forward cast. Those three movements each have their own very important role in a cast. So that accelerating up to a pop creates energy. As that line's moving backwards, it's starting to speed up, speed up, speed up, and eventually I catch it with that stop. So I go to my pop and stop, that line travels backwards, my rod stops and it bends. And then we release that energy with our paintbrush flick forward. So it's a pop, stop, and that paintbrush flick releases the energy and gives us good direction. There is one more thing to keep in mind though. Because when we're flicking our paintbrush, our canvas is out in front of us, or our dartboard is out in front of us when we're throwing our dart. If we pop, stop, and paintbrush flick, we then need to drop our rod down as well. So it's pop, stop, paintbrush flick, drop, and then catch a fish, ideally. Now, we're gonna go through and look at some common problems that start to happen with this cast. To start off with, people might not have their line nice and tight. It might be in a big pile in front of them. They go to pop and stop and nothing happens. The reason for that is that if your line isn't nice and tight already to start with, if you don't have a tight system, the rod won't start bending straight away. It won't start loading straight away. So instead of getting a nice bend on that rod and then releasing that energy to then release forward, all that happens if our line's in a big pile and nothing's tight is we slowly move it back, we don't get any energy, and then we go forward and there's no energy. So always start with a tight line. That means rod down, line straight. You're in a good starting position. The next most common thing that happens is that people accelerate up really well, but then they keep going. They go all the way back here. There's a few problems there. One, you're gonna get smacked on the grass and bushes behind you. And two, you don't store the energy really nicely in the rod. Now you might have heard before in fly casting, you know, between 10 and 2 or always stopping at 12 o'clock, that stop needs to be really crisp and not go too far back. If you think about stopping vertically, you're probably gonna end up stopping about here, which is perfect. But if you come back too far, the rod and the line travel at the same speed, the rod never gets a chance to bend, and then it all falls apart. So we've got to make sure that pop finishes in a really nice, almost vertical stop. Now, one of the main reasons people come too far back is that they lose their wrist. Their wrist starts to break down. Easiest way to fix that, tuck your sleeve into the bottom of the rod, and you'll find that your wrist can't go back any further than it needs to. It's a common misconception that fly fishing's all about your wrist. Your wrist is quite weak, well at least mine is, I'm not that tough. A really good muscle to use is your bicep. You can do a nice little bicep curl all day. Just imagine you're at the gym. I've got no idea what that feels like, but you're at the gym doing these ones. It's the same movement with a fly fishing cast. So I'd recommend you tuck the rod in your sleeve. We're accelerating up to a really good vertical stop. Then we're paintbrush flicking forward. This is where the last problem tends to come in, is that on our paintbrush flick, people go down. They hammer it down into the water because they're trying to get it out there. The harder you try to get it out there, the more it collapses down onto the water. That's why we talk about flicking paint onto a canvas out in front of you or throwing a dart forward. You want to cast over the water, not down onto the water. So what we do is pop it, stop it, and push forward, then drop our rod down. You don't want to get into the hammer throw motion, smacking it down here. Easiest way to fix that just look up at the horizon and aim for the horizon instead. Then drop down through. So you're gonna pop to a nice vertical stop, then you're gonna aim at the horizon and paintbrush flick. And if you do that all together, you'll get a nice little overhead cast. When we're fly fishing, as total pros, we don't call this the pop and stop and this the paintbrush flick. We call this the back cast and this the forward cast. And what I want you to do at home is practice doing this 2 or 3 times and then stop and have a breather. Then practice it again. Because going out into the backyard and waving backwards and forwards disintegrates quite quickly. What I want you to do is focus on picking it up and laying it down 3 times and then stopping and patting yourself on the back. If anything's going wrong, check that you're starting with a tight line, you're accelerating up to a nice crisp vertical stop, and you're pushing forward, not down. Pop it, stop it, and paintbrush flick it. Okay guys, now that you're doing your pop, stop, and paintbrush flick, we're gonna move on to shooting line. Getting line further out, because unfortunately, not all fish will wander around within pop, stop, and paintbrush flick distance for you to walk around and hit in the face. We do need to get more fly line out there. To start off with, you still want to do a pick up and lay down cast, but instead of using that line control finger here, you want to transfer the line to your off hand. So in my case, that's my left hand. If you're left-handed, it's your right hand. Surprise, surprise. And to start off with, don't worry about shooting line to start. Just practice doing your pick up and lay down cast, but holding the line really firmly in your opposite hand. So pop, stop, paintbrush flick. Pop, stop, paintbrush flick. You'll feel that line wants to go. It wants to get out there. So we're gonna let some line slip. Now, letting line slip doesn't mean dumping our line and finding out what's going to happen. We want to stay in control of that line at all times. So what we're going to do is pop, stop, and paintbrush flick. Just as that paint comes forward, we're going to let a little bit of line travel through our hands, and then we're going to grab it again. Because if we just dump all our line out here, we muck around, we've lost it, oh, a fish is eating it, oh, I've got to get that. This is when we start to come into line control. It's a little bit trickier, but it's essential for learning how to fly fish properly. So once you've got your pop, stop, and paintbrush flick sorted, and remember, give yourself time to learn, take a breather in between each cast, then we're gonna work on popping, stopping, and shooting. So pop, stop, shoot. Now, I've got my line out there, I can put it back in my fishing hand, and I can pull my line back in, or I can leave it out there for a fish to eat, or I can hook a fish and then be able to strip line if I need to. This line control, guys, we're going to be going through a lot in the next few videos. But let's work on getting this shoot down first. So, left hand in my case firmly grips the line. I pop, stop, and paintbrush flick. Right when I go to flick the paint, let some line slip. If you drop it, not the end of the world, rod down, grab it, pick it back up. The trick is never to completely let go of the line. If you watch my hands closely, you'll notice that I make a ring with my finger. That means I can always trap the line when I need to with my other fingers. So I pop, stop, and shoot. Pop, stop, and shoot. And like that, I've already got 2 rod lengths of fly line out. Then I can strip it back in after placing that line back in my right finger, and I can practice again. Pop, stop, and shoot. If you can get all that line out in 2 casts, you're absolutely winning. So now that we've learnt our pick up and lay down cast and how to shoot line, we're now going to learn how to false cast, how to hold line in the air nicely so that we can dry off a fly, change direction, or add line into our cast until we get far enough and then lay it down. The advantage of false casting over just the pick up and lay down cast is that we don't need to hit the water every time and tell fish that we're there. So we start off just like the pick up and lay down cast, with our rod tip down, our line tight, our foot forward, grip's good, check, check, check. I'm gonna put the line in my left hand, and all I want you to do is do a pick up and lay down cast, a pop, stop and paintbrush flick, but before that line touches the ground on the way forward, I want you to do another pop, stop and paintbrush flick. And you'll find that you can hold line in the air like this. Now this is called a loop.
Now you may have noticed I'm not Mickey. Just thought I'd jump in here and talk about loop shape for a minute. Now all a loop is the shape your fly line makes as it travels through the air. For example, I can have a nice tight loop like this, where what we call the rod leg and the fly leg are nice and close to each other. Or we can have a really big wide open loop, right? Now the rod leg and the fly leg are nice and far apart. Now what we're striving for when you're first starting out is relatively tight loops. There are times in fly fishing when we want wider loops, but we won't look at them today. Now tight loops are really aerodynamic and cast through the air nice and efficiently. Big wide open loops like this are not as efficient to cast with and don't cut through wind anywhere near as easily. Now the other downside to big wide open loops is they're not as accurate. Because that fly line gets blown around in the air a lot, if I want to hit a point very accurately, a big wide open loop gets blown around before I have a chance to control it at the fly. A nice tight loop is a lot more accurate, so you can put your fly exactly where you want it. Now, how do we create these tight loops? Well, as Mickey's been going through already in this video with his paintbrush flick, and that's exactly how you create a tight loop. At our forward cast and our back cast, with that abrupt stop and that nice paintbrush flick and our firm pop in the back, that's how we create a tight loop. So you can see I'm flicking that paintbrush forward and popping nice and hard in the back, and that abrupt stop on the forward cast and the back cast creates a nice tight loop. Now if I don't stop that rod quite as abruptly, that's when I start to get these big open loops. As you can see, my hand's not stopping abruptly on the forward cast and back cast, and it's opening that loop shape up. It also, as you can probably see, it's hitting the ground in front and behind me. See how it hits the water there? It even hits the water on the way back. That's one of those common problems we talked about earlier, is stopping that rod too far back. It will hit the grass on the way behind you. So making sure we're doing a nice abrupt stop on the forward cast and back cast is going to create a nice aerodynamic tight loop for nice accurate casting. Now the secret to getting tight loops as well is good tempo. If I go too quickly, what happens is that fly, those two legs of the loop will cross over, and you can even see that's hitting the rod on the way through sometimes. See that hit the rod there? It's creating a tight loop, and it's not a big wide open loop, but it's a little too tight and it's hitting the rod every cast. So a good tempo, letting that line turn over each time in front and behind, and you'll get a nice tight loop like that. Now, depending on how much fly line you've got out, your tempo will need to change. If I've got a long bit of fly line out the tip of my rod, I'm gonna have to wait a little longer in between those casts. I'm gonna have to pause for a bit longer. If I've got a nice short bit of fly line out the tip of my rod, I don't have to wait quite as long. Before Mickey runs through shooting line into false casts, a good thing to practice is to hold a nice tight loop for 3 casts, 2, 3, and lay it down. If you can hold a loop in the air without shooting any line for 3 casts, you can then start shooting. Back to Mickey.
If you can get a really nice shaped loop like this, that's nice and even, it's not too big and open, nor is it too tiny and hitting the rod and collapsing on each other, it means you'll be able to start shooting line as well. It's going to be a little bit trickier. It's going to involve a little bit of left hand, a little bit of right hand, working together at the same time. So once you can hold a loop nicely for 3 loops like that, we're going to do 3 false casts, and on the last 2, 3, we're going to shoot line just like on our pick up and lay down cast. But you'll notice we've still got a lot of line in reserve here. We need to start shooting line on all of those false casts. So we're going to try and shoot on the first, second and the third, see how you go. You might need to go back to just 1 or 2, but just practice. Popping, stopping, shooting. Popping, stopping, shooting. Popping, stopping, shooting. And all of that line went out. Now it's a little bit tricky. You've really got to work on your timing with both your left hand and your right hand. The most common problem we see is people either dropping the line, which means everything collapses, or they start going too fast, not doing your pop and stops, all your energy goes apart. A good way to practice is to pop it and stop it and shoot it, let it touch the ground, and just speed those intervals up. So pop, stop, shoot, pop, stop, shoot, pop, stop, shoot. I let it touch the ground on every one. Now I'm going to try and keep it off the ground. Pop, stop, shoot, pop, stop, shoot. Bada bing, bada boom. You're casting, hopefully. Now, as far as tips for casting goes, it is tricky to learn off a video. One of the best things you can do is look up a local casting instructor, come out with a friendly neighbourhood fly fishing guide, or annoy someone who already fly fishes to teach you the best they can how to do it. Now, as well as maybe going and seeing a proper casting instructor, coming out with a friendly guide, or just practicing a lot on grass, it's really important to practice on water where you can. Water's fantastic because it'll let you know quite often what you're doing wrong. For instance, if you're not accelerating up smoothly to your pop, if you just rip it out, you'll get a lot of big splashes and everything else. If you're not paintbrush flicking forward nicely and letting your line fall onto the water, if you're hammering down, you're going to get a lot of splashing as well. In general, splashing ain't the best. Just remember, start from the bottom up, make sure your feet are good, make sure your grip's good, make sure you're taking your time. One of the worst things you can do is sit there and just start flailing away and getting more and more frustrated. Always remember to have a breather when you're learning. Do 3 or 4 casts, stop, and then go again. Another really good tip too as well, these days I hear everyone has a phone. What you can do is set your phone up against a brick wall or something else facing you and get some awesome footage of yourself casting and double check what you might be doing wrong. Maybe your wrist is breaking and you're coming back too far, or you're coming forward too quick and your loops are collapsing, or you're not popping hard enough and nothing's getting out the back. These are all great little tips for teaching yourself how to cast. Also, you can always drop in the store. We're happy to come take you out the back and give you a quick tune-up. You can try to learn to cast by faxing Pat. It's incredibly difficult and I respect you if you do it. And go have fun. Take your time and throw some line.